Now, I was watching a football game the other day, and during the press conference, and as it seems to happen often, the athlete being interviewed after winning the game dropped I just want to thank God because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, I love sports, and that verse gets used a ton. But number one, using that verse there is kind of inappropriate. Think about it. Does that mean the other team didn't have Jesus on their side? I mean, it's understated, but it's pretty much the equivalent of like, that's right, other team, suck it. God likes me more than you, and Jesus made you lose. I mean, seriously though, using Philippians 4:13 this way is wildly out of context and is very wrong, but athletes aren't the only ones that are guilty of doing this. Anytime competition is involved, or it's about knuckling down, or getting the promotion, or acing tests, this verse, it gets tossed around. And sure, like I said, you can use that verse for things like that. I mean, you do you. But doing that is way out of context and actually diminishes what that verse is really about. In context, Philippians 4:13 is about persevering through suffering and being content in every moment through Christ. Paul is not inferring that Jesus gives you the strength to do whatever it is that you want. Instead, Paul's telling the church in Philippi, which was the first church in Europe and led by Lydia, according to Acts 16. And for more on that, I got a 3-hour workshop you might be interested in downloading. But the Philippian church was facing massive persecution. So Paul, who was in prison himself, writes a letter to the Philippian church and says that God grants the strength to be content, no matter the situation or circumstance, whether suffering or not. That verse isn't about attainment. It's not about crushing your competition. It's not about winning, getting the new job, or getting the highest score. This verse is about people like my friend in India. 9 years ago, I was training indigenous missionaries to take the good news to villages and cities along the East Coast. And one of the young men I was blessed to disciple had it pretty rough. This is a place where people suffer for their faith. A year prior to my beginning to work with this missionary, he had been chained naked to a low pole on a concrete floor for almost a year. His arms and legs broken and reset numerous times, forced to eat off the ground like a dog. He had a permanent bend in his back from not being able to stand up straight and from tortures that most of us could never or want to imagine. And these scars, man, I mean, you name it. What his captors did to him is horrendous. His crime, loving Jesus and telling people about the wonder of God. His torture wasn't sanctioned by a governing body. He'd actually been held prisoner in a remote village elder's basement by those he wished to share Jesus with. And he never stopped sharing Jesus until he was eventually released. And man, this kid's eyes, the glory this kid has in his eyes. Did I mention that at the time, he's only 19? His eyes just shone with the love of Jesus. And the scripture that he recited to himself for a year, enduring chains and beatings, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You see, I was supposed to be teaching him, but his example taught me way more than I could ever teach him. And he's still out there, shining with the light of Jesus, traveling to remote villages, and sharing the love and acceptance of Jesus. So if you ever find yourself in prison or really persecuted for your faith, feel free to quote Paul's example. If you're trapped in cycles of suffering and want to use Philippians 4:13 as a waypoint, yeah, that's using it in context too. But shouting it at the church softball game so your ringers can smash the ball over the tree line, not so much. Context is important. So God bless. See you soon.